Third Reich's army was extraordinary in terms of organization, resources, and planning, making it ready to face any operation, regardless of the amount of bloodshed required. Among all its tactical combat tools, one stands out as deadly for all its enemies in Europe. We're talking about the strategy known as Blitzkrieg, and in today's video, we're going to explain how it worked and what victories it allowed Hitler's Germany to achieve. Don't move away from the screen because we're about to start a new video on military history. Let's go. In the first phase of the Second World War in Europe, Germany sought to avoid extensive conflict, knowing it needed to optimize its resources to the fullest for any hope of victory. The German strategy was to defeat its opponents in a series of short campaigns, allowing it to conquer much of Europe in record time. The Nazi army remained victorious for over 2 years due to a particularly special military tactic, the resurgence of a strategy known as Blitzkrieg, a concept devised in the early 20th century in Britain, was implemented and perfected in Germany by Heinz Guderian.
That enabled armies to move so far so rapidly. The secret lay in the organization of the striking spearhead. Armored forces came first, closely followed by motorized divisions, which peeled off, forming solid walls. And through the corridor, thus formed, raced the supply trucks to feed the ever-lengthening column.
The Blitzkrieg tactic, or lightning war, utilized the concentration of heavy offensive weapons such as tanks, aircraft, and artillery on a narrow battlefield front. These forces managed to breach enemy defenses, allowing armored tank divisions to swiftly penetrate and have free passage behind enemy lines. This caused disruption and disorganization among the defenses, precisely what the Nazis anticipated. This initial shock effect, combined with Germany's air power, prevented the enemy from resupplying or reorganizing troops, and thus prevented them from reinforcing to seal fissures in the front. German forces could simultaneously continue their attack while encircling different groups of enemy troops and forcing their surrender. Guderian optimized the Blitzkrieg to shape it into a truly lethal strategy. This form of combat relied on some fundamental pillars that the Third Reich exploited to perfection. The first was the characteristic German panzer tanks. The idea was to envision them as vehicles grouped in autonomous bodies, advancing en masse and engaging in combat without concern for infantry divisions. Their mission was to destroy the enemy line at its weakest point and encircle better prepared positions, leading to their disintegration. Once this objective was achieved, tanks synchronized with infantry and simultaneously assaulted the enemy position from a multitude of different points. Attacks were coordinated through radio communications, which could be installed on any aircraft or vehicle, as they could be encrypted and decrypted at high speed. While this system proved to be extremely effective and devastating for those who endured it, the truth is that it depended on two determining factors for its success: speed and surprise. If either of these elements failed, or if the enemy had enough time to react and reorganize their defenses at the precise point where the German tanks intended to attack, the Blitzkrieg could turn into a genuine disaster and a massacre for the German troops. For this reason, when the Second World War began, the High Command made it clear that attacks should not be halted under any circumstances. To ensure this order, Guderian himself requested his men to stay awake for 48 hours if necessary, so the enemy would not have time to organize an effective defense. The question then was how to keep soldiers awake and active for such a long time without sleep. Through a new drug of the time commercially known as Pervitin, a variant of methamphetamine, the desired objective was achieved. The drug's effects on the human body made the consumer feel suddenly alert and stronger, with heightened senses to the maximum. It also had a psychotropic effect, where soldiers believed they were more alive and full of energy, generating feelings of euphoria, lightness, and freshness. Knowing they needed to keep their men awake, the Nazi leaders distributed more than 35 million Pervitin pills among the different branches of the army, making the Blitzkrieg a success. Germany used the Blitzkrieg tactic in various invasions over 12 months between late 1939 and early 1941. The first of the campaigns that was successfully completed was against Poland, a nation that was attacked and within 28 days was under German control, demonstrating the power and effectiveness of this spectacular military tactic. Since most of the Allied European military leaders then favored defensive lines and trenches as the basic form of combat, the Blitzkrieg, carried out with great resources and rigor, was unstoppable. This was the case with Denmark and Norway, nations that were invaded in such a forceful manner that they virtually offered no resistance. The Danish territory was invaded in the early hours of the morning in such a devastating way that, even though they went to bed as an independent nation, the people of Denmark woke up to find themselves under the territory of the Third Reich, thanks to a lightning war initiated around 3 a.m. and finished by about 8 a.m. Nazi Germany was able to take hold of this country and its neighbor Norway, which were key strategic points as they were Hitler's major suppliers of steel.
That is, I was already 8 years old, and the Germans were about to invade France, they had already invaded part of France, but they were about to invade Paris. And it was a great panic. It was what we called in French l'exode, the exodus. And thousands upon thousands of inhabitants of Paris had left Paris. They were on all the roads going south, basically, because the Germans were coming from the northeast. And I remember that very vividly. Paris was almost empty.
Similarly, the invasions of Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and especially France, which occurred in May 1940, were successful due to the implementation of the Blitzkrieg. Although there were some difficulties in Paris, as the column that penetrated the French defenses became long and dangerously narrow, the support provided by the German aviation troops was crucial. The planes bombed and weakened the enemy, while the infantry was able to enter through the gap created by the tank column and overwhelm the opposing defenses, ensuring the success of the mission. The last fully successful implementation of the Blitzkrieg, used by the Third Reich, was during the occupation of Yugoslavia and Greece, which occurred in April 1941. After the dishonor and humiliation suffered by Mussolini's troops in Greek territory, the Führer decided it was time to act and crush that region. Hitler's goal was to occupy the Balkan Peninsula, but first, he had to add countries to the Axis to reach it. While he diplomatically negotiated the inclusion of Bulgaria and Romania in his camp, an uprising forced him to implement a new Blitzkrieg on Yugoslav soil. Once the conquest was achieved, the German army finally ordered the continuation of the Lightning War and, with the same strength and column with which they took control of Yugoslavia, set foot on Greek soil and took complete control of the territory. Surely you must be wondering how the Nazis lost the war despite having this foolproof strategy on their side. The reality is that despite waging wars on various fronts with Great Britain, the German forces took the bold decision to invade the Soviet Union in June 1941, using their star tactic. Undoubtedly, the methods of murder were extremely savage, and what happened inside the concentration camps was no exception. Competitions for quick killings were organized at Jasenovac, where competitors used knives called Srbošek, translated literally as Serb cutter. One of the winners of these bloody competitions was Petar Berdzika, who cut no less than the chilling figure of 1,360 prisoners' throats. There were also large bonfires where prisoners were thrown in alive. They were beaten on the head with a opening successive battlefronts and dividing forces were exactly contrary to what the Blitzkrieg strategy dictated, as it required all the shock force and resources to be directed towards a single target to conquer. Guderian himself, the ideologue of the strategy, published in his book Achtung Panzer what the weak point of the tactic was. It would be a great mistake, especially when there are scarce means of combat, to use tanks and resources where one does not intend to attack with a specific purpose. A second German offensive against the Soviet Union was carried out in 1942, with the city of Stalingrad as the objective. However, this assault was weaker, mainly due to the hostility of the terrain and the loss of resources due to the confrontation with the United States and Great Britain. Sensing these weaknesses, the Soviets launched a counteroffensive in November 1942, completely dismantling the Blitzkrieg strategy, trapping and destroying the German army in Stalingrad. Germany was unable to defeat the Soviet Union, which ended up fighting alongside the Allies for the rest of the Second World War. This is how the Third Reich became trapped in a multi-front war that culminated in its defeat in May 1945. We're nearing the end of this video and we wanted to ask you, do you think the Nazi strategy was well planned, or was it the lack of preparation of the militias defending themselves that determined the success of the Blitzkrieg? Leave your opinions in the comments below. That's all for today's video. We thank you for staying until the end, and we look forward to seeing you in the next installments of Military History.